This video demonstration is a very basic demonstration about how to model a face, naturalistically or realistically. Word of advice. If this is the first face you've ever made, I would make sure that you are doing a project that is more oriented toward experimentation. For example, you could do a caricature or you could do a project with an exaggerated face. I will be starting you off with a very simple exercise that you can put on a rounded tile, a small cup, or a small planter that just walks you through the steps of making a face. This is going to be an unemotional, straight-on face where you learn how to make eyes, nose, mouth, hair, ears, and all of the facial muscles. Once you've walked through the initial steps of how to make a very simple face, then you can start putting emotion into your face. Part 1 of this video demonstration just talks about the layout of a face. Where do the eyes go? Where do the nose go? Where does the mouth go? Part 2 of this demonstration walks you through the steps of each feature of a face. So again, this is going to be an exercise of just a simple, straight-on, no emotion face. Part 3 talks a little more about emotion and some of the things that you should consider when you're trying to put emotion into the face. Because as you can imagine, a lot more goes in to making a face with emotion. In addition, I'll also be talking about how to make an open mouth and how to make teeth in part 3. I have a cat tugging on the curtain. Yeah. Ah! With that, I guess we'll get started. I wanted to talk to you about these books. This is, I'm not going to be able to say his name, Philippe and Charisse, maybe, Ferrat. I just call him Ferrat. Maybe that is how to say it, maybe it's not, because it's French and I do not speak French. But I want to direct you to anything that you can find of his is just fantastic. What I am going to do for you today is just show you very basic stuff like I've explained. If you are interested in figure sculpture and getting a little bit better at it, you want to buy his books. He also has videos that are hard to find. I don't think that they're still being made, but if you can find them, grab his videos because it shows this in action. What I am going to show you today is loosely based on what he does. He definitely takes it a lot further. In the portrait sculpting book, this is more of a beginner book, and he will break down what the different elements of the face are. So I just want to show you that. I'm probably getting into some copyright stuff right now, so I'm not going to go into this book. I just want you to understand that this book is more of a beginner book. If you're really interested in learning how to model the face realistically, get this book. And then if you want to know more, you can get this Mastering Portraiture book that really starts to get into expression. You can see that happening here. To the point where he talks about the expression and what muscles are being engaged, where the fat is in the face, what's happening in the forehead, where the lines are. So this book really gets into making your work come alive, and it just is it's very good. I have not read through it because this isn't my thing, but the little that I have read, it would be invaluable to anybody that really wants to know about figurative sculpture, or at least the face. I don't know what else he gets into if he does do full bodies. I'm sure that he does. But I would start with these two if you are interested in learning more and going further than what this very basic demonstration is going to give you. In order to create a modeled face, you are going to need clay, slip, water, just plain water with several size brushes, a sponge, all of the medium-sized wire tools that you have. You don't know what tips you're really going to need, so just grab whatever you have. The Kemper modeling tool that has the wire on one side and the wooden end on the other. That wooden end is what you're going to use a lot. Notice that it has the point on it. It also is flat on one side and concave on one side, convex on the other. So if you don't have this tool, try to grab something that is similar to it. You're going to use this tool a lot. And if you have several of these tools, go ahead and grab them all because they all have a little bit different of a tip, and it might be nice to have different shapes of wire, of these tiny little wire tools. I'm sorry, this is a little hard to see. You're going to need a fettling knife, a needle tool, a scoring tool, a smooth metal rib, a serrated metal rib, and you're going to need something to put your face on, whether that be a solid built bust, a thrown hollow form, a coiled form, a pinched form, something to put your face on. And last but certainly not least, you're going to need your references. References can be something that is Googled and downloaded from the internet. It's good to have both references that are caricatures like cartoons because they always exaggerate, and sometimes it's good to have those exaggerations so that you understand what's happening in the face. In addition to that, you also want references of actual people. So again, you can get this online. What I would highly recommend is that you have references of your face or somebody else's face that is in the emotion that you're trying to portray, and that you have them from all angles. So you want a straight on, you want a kind of quarter view and a side view. That way you're understanding what the face looks like in all of those views. It's so much more important than you can imagine. And because you are working three-dimensionally, you are going to want to have that information in 3 dimensions. So I would highly recommend that you have references of your face or somebody else's face in multiple angles. Even the top down, the bottom up, all of that stuff is so important. Another fun thing that you can do if you are doing something where you're really exaggerating an emotion or you're exaggerating a feature of the face, you can make silly faces. And what does that look like? Tape is a wonderful thing. You can always tape your face up or your friend's face if you don't want to do yours, and just do silly things with your face, because that's really going to get this point of emotion, of exaggeration across. If you're doing something like a face jug or a face planter or something that's more caricature and not so like I'm making a bust, you want to consider the shape of your form and where your emotion is going to go. If you're going to have an exaggerated feature and you want to exaggerate the eyes, then your volume should probably go on top. If you want to exaggerate the mouth, your volume should probably go on the bottom. So depending on the shape of your form is really going to determine what you do, right? Or where you put your eyes, right? So that's going to look better with an exaggerated mouth than if you have a tiny little mouth here and really big eyes. It doesn't quite make as much sense doing it this way. Now you could, depending on what you're trying to do, but you really should try to consider your form. If you want to exaggerate eyes, maybe your form is something like this, right? Where you can actually exaggerate your eyes and, do something with your mouth that works more with the form. So definitely consider your form as you're doing this. And you can see in some of these images here where I have decided to put my volume, the volume of the form. So in this first one, we have a big mouth, a big grumpy mouth. So I put the volume a little bit more toward the middle, or more toward the bottom there. So, and then the eyes, which weren't as important, kind of go up into the neck of the vessel. The second one is kind of a dunce, and you can see, because I wanted the eyes to show that emotion of being kind of like, duh, I wanted to make sure I had enough room in the area of the eyes. So the volume in this one really is right in the middle. And I still am able to exaggerate those cheeks by still giving big eyes. And obviously that nose is way oversized, for effect. And then in this third one, the volume is at the top. And if you see on the side view, I chose to really exaggerate the cheeks at that area of where the volume is. And that just further accentuates this kind of love-struck smile that you see here. So really consider your volume, where you're putting your volume, and what emotion you're trying to portray. That's going to be really important. When I'm working on a face for a planter or a cup or a jug, I have a hollow volume here. So it's going to be important that, first of all, it's leather hard, so that when I am putting pressure on, it's not going to completely collapse. Now, that being said, anytime I am putting pressure on it, I am going to hold on the inside while I'm pressing from the outside. I'm never going to just start pressing in. But you do want to make sure that you're leather hard, and you also want to make sure, because it's going to be a lot easier for you to have it faced up towards you like this, that you do have foam underneath your sheet. And I'm even going to go further by putting a sandbag or more foam, or a towel, something to actually hold it at the angle that I need to hold it in order to work on it. Because I need you guys to see what I'm doing, I am going to go ahead and take my sandbag away, but normally I would have something there to put it up toward me. I do foster cats in my studio, so this is Belina. You may see her getting in my business here. That's Belina. She's currently looking for a home because she doesn't really like to be around other cats and doesn't like that situation of a shelter. So the first thing I'm going to do here is find the better side of my form. Now, these are thrown, but you can certainly coil, pinch, whatever you need to do. Now, for this first one, as I said, kind of in this introduction, this is just going to be a basic face. I'm not talking about features. I'm not talking about gesture or emotion. It's just going to be, this is what an eye looks like. This is what a nose looks like. This is what a mouth looks like. So you can see that I have just a very plain form. There's not a lot going on in this form. If you are going to do a practice cup or a practice face, you could even do something as easy as just getting a tile, just to go through these features before you actually put them on a form that you made. Later on in this presentation, I will talk a little bit more about facial features and getting some emotion in there. But for right now, we're just doing the basics. So my form is pretty standard, not really a lot going on here. So I should note here that when you want to kind of get your face together to begin with. So let's just say this is a head, a very round head. You want to make a center line, And in the center of that, that is actually where an eye goes. So if you're actually making a bust and you don't have an open head like for a jug or a planter, just know that your eye line is going to be in the center of your ball. Kind of crazy, right? And then from the center of where your eyes are to the bottom of where your chin is, you're going to go ahead and make a line there as well. So this is the halfway point between your eye line and your chin. And then the halfway point between that line, which is going to be the bottom of your nose, to the chin is actually where your lips go. So this is just the layout of the face, and then of course hair is going to go here, or your open pot will be through here. When you have your form in front of you, you may want to look and see what side is the better side. Especially if you're coiling, you may not have much of a rounded form, or one side might be a little bit better. Knowing that you're going to be putting volume on one side, let's say this is the face, you know that you're going to be putting a lot of clay here. So you might want to choose the flatter side of your vessel to put the face on if you've got one side that has a little more volume. That's going to help kind of counterbalance your form a little bit. So go ahead and choose. I'm not too concerned about my better side here. I did throw these because that's the quickest way to make a form for me. So mine's pretty round to begin with, but it's demo, so I'm not too concerned. But if I would have dropped it on its face or something weird would have happened, I probably would want to put the face there. Now I need to keep in mind that I still want to have bone structure, so I still want to make sure when I'm drawing my face that I'm going, that I have room for eyebrows, right? And I probably even want to put a little bit of hair coming down through here, so I want to make sure when I make that eye line that it is low enough. So this is going to be a pretty small face, but I do want to put my center line, because that's going to be where everything, well, it's the center line of the face, right? So everything's going to kind of be built from there. And then I'm going to go ahead and put my eye line way down here, which I know seems kind of crazy that it's that low. But again, this is going to be the center of my eye, and I still need eyelids. I still need my eye bone, and I want to go ahead and get some muscle up here, some bone structure up here. So my eye line is going to be way down here because I want to give myself some room. And I'm probably going to go ahead and make sure that my chin is going to be about here. So that's going to be kind of where I'm ending my piece. So between my eye line and my chin, I'm going to go in the middle of that. That's going to be the bottom of my nose. And in the middle of the bottom of my nose and my chin is going to be where my lips are. So you can see this is going to be a pretty small face. The first thing I want to do is get my orbital sockets in there for my eyes. And what I'm going to do, because this is still, it's leather hard, but it's still malleable enough that I can come in and I can actually start sinking my eye sockets. Now, you do want to make sure that you're giving yourself some room here. So I'm going to put a few fingers between so that I know that I'm not getting too close to the bridge of my nose. And I'm just going to go ahead and press this in. Or if yours isn't pressing very well, sometimes you need to rub. Now, this is going to be your whole eye orbital. The whole eye orbital. So you're going to make it a lot bigger than you think you need to make it. Now, if you're building solid, you're building this up, so things happen a little bit different when you're building solid. Again, looking at that book that I mentioned is really what you want to do when you're actually doing this. So those are my eye orbitals. Nice and big, because in those orbitals I am going to be putting my lower lid, my upper lid, and my eyeball in that whole space. And I'm going to actually do those first. Your eye shape is going to be an oval disc. It's an oval disc. That means it's going to be oval shaped, not round. Don't make them round. It's going to be oval shaped, and it's going to be flat-ish. Notice that I have a little convex going on here, so it is a little bit rounded because your eyes are rounded. So I want to make sure that I keep both sides rounded, almost like a pillow. You know how a pillow will taper a little bit at the end? That's what you're doing for the shape of your eyes. You want two oval discs that are the same size. So what I would suggest is to start with one ball of clay and put them in two. Now these oval discs need to be big enough to go into the entire orbital of your face. And I will show you this now. I know this doesn't seem right, but what you're going to do is take your scoring tool and just really scratch the heck out of the eyes, because again, this is leather hard. If you're building solid, you may not have to do this because your clay is still probably pretty wet. And I am going to go ahead and slip and score. Now later when you go to do the gesture or your emotion, you may want different size eyes. But if you're doing a practice, you probably don't want to do that, okay? So for sake of demo, I'm satisfied with my eyes being like that. Okay. The tool you want to use is the wire tool. Kemper makes these that have the pointed handle. So with this tool, one side is convex and one side is a little bit concave. And I'm going to be using both of the sides on this tool. There are a few numbers of these temper tools that have the pointed handle. That's the one you want. This happens to be W26. There are 3 of them that have the pointed handle. They also make these tools with a rounded handle, but for this we want the pointed handle. If you don't have this tool, try to find something else that you have that has a concave or a flattened side and a pointed tip. Okay? So for your eyes, you're going to want to make sure that you are supporting, because you are going to be putting a lot of pressure. And what I'm going to be doing right now is making my eyeball, my eyelids, up and down. Now, if you feel like you want to, especially when you're starting to make a gesture, if you feel like you need to have some kind of idea of what your eye shape needs to look like, you can go ahead and pencil it in with your needle tool, but it's not really necessary, especially if you're doing a practice one. So I'm going to support my back. I'm going to take that pointed side of the tool at an angle, because I'm going to make that little tear duct, and tear ducts are always going to be at that angle. And I am going to really press in. Look at how far I pressed in. And then I'm also going to do that to the other side. And this is where, you know, when you are making an emotion, where the sides of your eye are going to be located is going to really determine what your emotion looks like. Notice I'm also using the concave part or the flat part of my tool when I do this. So I'm going to come in on this side, and I'm also going to make where I want my eye to be on this side, and I am pressing way in. I am pressing at an angle, right? So I'm at an angle. I'm not going straight in. I'm at an angle, because what I want to do is start to get the curvature of my eyeball, right? And so now I can take that concave part of the tool, and I'm still kind of at an angle toward the middle of my eye, and I'm just making that rounded part of my eye with the concave part of the tool. So I'm not flattening it. And I'm also not coming in here and making a line, right? I'm just using the angle, and you're going to hear me talk a lot in terms of planes. So there's my eyeball. There's my eyeball. And then in order to get my lids going, I'm going to take the convex part of the tool or the rounded part of the tool, and still at an angle, I'm going to almost push the lids toward my eye, and then I'm going to pull back. And I'm going to smear those lids into my face. The shape that you make your eyelids also determines the eye when you start getting into emotion. Again, we're not looking too hard into that right now. I'm just trying to get an eye made, right? You're going to use your reference images, and you're going to shape your eye according to the reference images. But I'm just going to show you something right now. Right now we have just kind of a plain eye, but if I were to take my lid and do something like that, I make more of an angry eye. If you do that and you don't want anger, you just kind of come in here and you pull that lid back up again. Luckily, you know, with wet clay, you can kind of shape things the way you want it. If you want a sad eye, you start putting your tears up like that. And then your cheeks will actually end up having something to do with that as well, okay? So we're not worried too much right now about emotion. I just want to show you how important the shape of your eye becomes when you are starting to put an emotion in your eye. But for right now, I'm going to try to just get that out because I don't really want emotion in this first one. It's putting too much pressure on you to make emotion right now. I'm going to go ahead and do my second eye, and I want you to notice while you have this here, notice how big that orbital is, or how big this is, and how little the eye becomes. So that's really important to have an understanding of that, right? Big orbital, big disc of clay. Look at how little the eye becomes. Because if you start with a little disc, you're going to have a tiny, tiny eye. This second one isn't as easy for me when I demo because I'm using my left hand. And I am not ambidex, whatever that word is. I'm just not. Okay. This is when it's good to have some kind of, you could have even used a template to kind of make sure your eyes are the same size. I'm not worried about that, but you know, where you put this and where you put that is going to determine how big your eye is. For demo purposes, I really am not very worried about it. So I'm just going to come in here, and at the angle of the tool, I'm going to make sure that my eye stays round, not my eyeball stays round. Knowing that later, if I need to pull more clay off, because I usually do pull more clay off, I can kind of get to it later. So I've got my eye shape. And now I'm going to go ahead and with the concave part of the tool, I'm going to make my lids, and I'm going to pull those lids back into the face. This is also why I slip and score so far, because I want to make sure that when I am pulling this wet clay that it has some teeth to sink into. It's just going to help later. Okay. So I've got some eye shaping to do. I can do some of that now, but I'm going to move on because I know that a little bit later I can always kind of come in here and define my eyes a little bit better. Okay, so you can do as much work as you want right now. I'm going to hold off when I can concentrate a little bit better and do that. So those are eyes. Isn't that cool? Isn't that cool? So fast. You guys can do this. That's what's so cool about this. Okay. For the nose, this is a super rudimentary way to make the nose. It just gets your shape going. This is going to be from the bridge all the way down to where your nose ends, right? So from bridge to tip, and then you're going to put 2 balls on the side of the nose. Those become your nostrils, and then you will put 1 ball on top of everything, okay? And that just becomes the nose. Super rudimentary. Again, once you if you were to look in that book that I talked about, Farrat's book, you'll see that the nose is actually just made of a bunch of different planes. So this is kind of more of how you would do a kid nose, but I just want you to get the overall shape of the nose. And once you get these made, you're going to go ahead and smush everything together. But before I do that, I do want to show you one thing on the face. When you're making the bridge of your nose, make sure that the nose, because remember that this is the line of the bottom. Oops, this is the line of the bottom of your nose, right? This was your eye line. This is the line for the bottom of your nose. So make sure that the tip hits that bridge, or that line, and that your bridge does go all the way up, at least past your eyes, because we are actually going to pull this into the brow line. But for right now, you're just going to kind of make sure that the nose actually fits. And once you do that, then you're ready to go. So that was good enough for me. I'm probably going to have a pretty big nose here, but that's okay. So I'm going to go ahead and put my nostrils on, and I'm going to go ahead and just start smearing this together. Again, if you get into that book, you're going to see better ways to make noses, or better looking noses, but this is just to get you started. So now that I've put my nostrils on, I'm going to go ahead and put the tip of my nose. You know how noses kind of, some of them will hook up at the end, some of them hook down at the end. Noses add a lot of character to a face, right? You got prominent noses, you've got really tiny noses that won't hold glasses up. You have cute little pixie noses that turn up at the end. You have noses that are a little more beak-like. Noses are like beautiful. I love noses. Oh, I love noses. They give people such character. Of course, I don't like my nose, but you know. Okay. When we go to clean everything up, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the planes of noses. But for right now, this just gives you an overall shape of a nose, because we're just trying to get these facial features on here, and we're going to define later. I am going to make sure that I remember where my line is, but I'm also going to slip and score where I'm going to be pulling that nose. The reason I don't slip and score my whole face right away is because I want to make sure that I still know where my lines are. So I can see that my nose line was right there. Okay. As usual, I'm going to make sure that I do not collapse my form when I'm adding this pressure of my nose. And I'm going to, when I start pulling my nose up, I'm going to start pulling it into my brow line. So I didn't make a huge bridge here. Sometimes the top of my nose is a little bit, I have more material up there. But this starts to make that brow. We're going to put that brow in later. Okay. And for right now, I don't really care. I just want to make sure everything's mushed in, because again, I am going to come in here later and I'm going to define everything a little bit better. So I'm going to turn this to the side and show you that I'm just kind of smearing everything in. If the slip is kind of getting too slippery, because you did just slip and score, you can always take that convex part of the tool and just smush everything together, because I want to make sure that my nose is on there. If you feel like, oh my gosh, I made my nose way too big, you can always come in and pull some off, right? You can do that. It's clay. The beautiful thing about clay is that you can shape, you can add, you can take things off, whatever you need to do. Okay. Okay. I'm going to take a minute to shape my nose just a little bit better, and then I'm going to, what I like to say, blow out my nostrils. All right, I've shaped my nose a little bit better, although it's still very crooked. I'm not too worried about all of that because I know that I can deal with it later. My nostrils are definitely not right, but I'm going to put some nostrils in, and that is going to start rounding and flaring out the nostrils a little bit. So what you're going to do is take the convex side of your tool, and where your nostril is, you're going to go ahead and jab that in, and you're almost going to pull it out and around. See how I've flared that nostril? Now, a nostril isn't usually round. When you go to actually shape your nose, you can kind of make the shape of a nostril that you want. But for the most part, I'm just kind of getting it in there. This side's really flat. So I'm probably going to either have to add clay or really flare this part out later. But you want to get those nostrils flared out a little bit and give your nose some volume. Okay. And again, shapes and all of that can happen later. You have so much work to do just with getting your lips in, getting your details in, that I'm not too worried. I know this is like super thin right here. I probably will end up adding clay there later, but for right now, I'm not too worried about it. What I want is to make sure that I've kind of got some nostrils going. The general shapes for your mouth are going to consist of 4 shapes. The first one is going to be a little coil that, as you can see, is tapered at the end. Where your end is has to go. This is going to look so big, right? But this is going to be the area between your nose and your lips. This is also going to be this whole thing that I'm going to show you is going to be your upper lip and your bottom lip. Your tapers need to go about where your halfway point is in your eyes. Otherwise, you're going to have a teeny tiny mouth like you can see in the image. You don't want a teeny tiny mouth. So make sure that that first upper lip is reaching the middle of your eyes. Then you're going to have what is going to be your bottom lip. And then you're going to have, which is kind of this moon. It is going to be a little shaped like a moon, like a crescent moon. And then you're going to have little bits of clay. These are probably a little bit too big, but you're going to have little bits of clay that fit in. And this kind of essentially is going to be the corner of your mouth. So those are the shapes that you're going to need for your lips. I know that this is where I wanted my chin to be. So this is my whole lip area, and I'm going to go all the way down to the chin with my score marks. And I'm really tearing it up because I am going to be pulling my clay up into where my cheeks are going to be, and I'm going to be pulling it actually down into where my chin is going to be. So really make sure that you rip that up and get your slip in there, and unless you're building solid, you're going to slip and score your top lip on. But you're not going to apply a lot of pressure just yet because you're going to use your tools to do that. So I just want to show you a little bit about what this shape is going to do so that you have an understanding of what's happening here. So you can see that this shape becomes your lip and then the space between your nose and your mouth. First thing I'm going to do is kind of connect my nose right here. Kind of get that in there. And then I'm going to take the convex part of my tool and just start pulling the lip in here. That starts to build up. the fat around my mouth. You can pull some of that up your nose. And then, you know, because your lips are in planes, they are not, there's not going to be a line on your lip. It's going to be a plane that goes from this direction or angle to this angle of your actual lip. So just have an understanding of that. I'm going to use my fingers to just kind of flatten this out a little bit so that I've got those planes in there, knowing that later I am going to put some fat back into my lips because lips are rounded usually. But I do want to kind of get the change in direction going. So you can see with that upper lip, I now have a change of direction or a change of angle there. It all looks pretty funny right now, but that's what you're starting with, is that upper lip looking like that. A similar thing is going to happen with that bottom lip where you're going to end up going to the edge, defining the corners of the mouth. This is going to be that fatty area on each side of your chin, and this becomes the bottom lip. You can do that with the tool. You can do that with your hands. I like to at least define my corners with the concave part or the flat part of the tool, just to kind of get that going so that I understand where it's going into those corners. And then it's a little bit easier for me to come in here with my thumb and just start pulling some of that clay down. Okay. So you see it's starting to form. These become planes again, putting any fatty stuff in later. For right now, they just become the planes. So you have the bottom lip in there, looking a little funny from the side, but you can see that it's starting to form the bottom lip. And then with those two little ball pieces that go on the side, those are going to kind of bridge where the corners of your mouth are. So you can just kind of flatten them out a little bit and just start pulling them in to start building up that musculature on the side of your mouth. Mouths, I feel like, are the hardest thing to do on a face. Getting it to look natural at the corners is always a hard thing. You're going to define that a little bit more later. For right now, as long as you've got what looks like a mouth in, when we start to put muscles in, it is going to help start defining some of that. Right now, it may look kind of puckered, it may look kind of weird, but just know that we are going to work on that mouth. But this gets you started there. We're going to put a chin in, which is at least going to press those lips back in. So I love putting chins in. I don't know, chins just make the biggest difference. A chin is just a ball of clay. Maybe you flatten it out a little bit and you're just going to stick it right there. And start pulling it in. Don't flatten it too much from the top, right? You're just kind of pulling in the edges. And already your lips are starting to look a little bit more natural. Amazing what a chin can do. Amazing. We're still looking pretty rough here. The next thing we're going to start to do is put the muscles in so that we can kind of pop those lips back into the face. The muscles are going to make sure that the nose doesn't look too big, and it just starts really making your face look like it's actually human. So let me get started on what muscles go where. To start with your muscles, you need these basic shapes. So I have 2 longer coils, I have 2 shorter coils, and then I have these 2 kind of triangular, flattish shapes. As you can imagine, these end up being the brow bone. This becomes the cheekbone, or the kind of your cheek fat that goes around your mouth, and these become your cheekbones that are kind of going back towards your ears. So let's go ahead and start with the fat around each side of your mouth. Since we just did the mouth and our mouths are probably looking kind of bad right now, you're going to go ahead and just take your coil, and this is going to go, if you've got space between your eye and nose, you're going to put this there. I don't really have space because my nose is really big, and I'm just going to kind of pull this down around like that. And I'm going to do that on both sides. What becomes really important with these muscles is how you press them in. What you don't want to do is just flatten everything. What you want to do is press them in at the top, of course, a little bit, but then pull the edges. And I'm at the top here, I'm going to pull around my eye. This starts to get kind of your eye fat in. And I'm just going to pull away from the center of that muscle on each side. You can always flatten and take clay away later. This is going to go up into here, right? So I'm just pulling where it looks like it would need to go, because you're building up the face muscles of your work. And what's important is that, do you see right now you can still see the coil? You need to get that out. So you're smoothing everything out so that it doesn't look like you have a coil there. Now, some people's faces, you'll see that it actually looks like it could just be a coil there, right? We all have different lines in our face, but we want this to be more fat-like and less I have a coil there like. So do you see it's still pretty prominent down here? I may work on that a little bit if I don't want that there, that kind of marionette line. But you can see I've blended it pretty good, and it's just starting to kind of make that face fat. And you're going to want to do that to both sides. Now, I'm probably going to put some more through here a little bit later, but this is just getting that around the mouth. And you'll notice, do you see how it's starting to press that mouth back? It's looking better. I will probably put something through here in a little bit But just so you understand, this is a process and we're just starting to build up the muscles in the face. So again, I'm pressing down a little bit on the top because I do want to flatten it out a little bit, but I'm taking those ends and that's what I'm blending in to all of the places that they need to blend into. When I'm up around my eye, I'm pulling it, and I'm just pulling it away from that center. So this is a really good example of make sure that you don't leave that line. Do you notice the difference between this side and how this has been rounded off and blended in? I started like this, but I want to make sure that I come in now and I start really blending in and smoothing out that rough ridge. We don't want any ridge there. So I have those lines in, or those muscles in. And now I'm going to put my cheekbones in. And my cheekbones are going to be these triangular things, these triangular shapes. And I am going to pull these toward my eye. I'm going to pull this side down on the outside of that muscle that I just put in. And then I'm going to pull this tip back toward where the ear would be. So your ear would be, you know, your ear is kind of in line with your eye. So you're going to be pulling it back toward that way. Obviously you need to slip and score if you're not, if you need to. This is all wet, so I'm not worried here. This I should probably go in and slip and score. When I'm pressing this in, it's the same sort of thing where I don't want to totally flatten it out because the whole point is to make the fat in your face or the muscles in your face. And then you want to move the clay around where it needs to go. So if you have a little bit too much in your cheek, you can start pulling it up around the eye because we're going to need some stuff up there. Just want to make sure you're getting this all blended in here. And now you have that cheekbone. You can see as I've been moving around with this thing that my eyes have gotten a little messed up. That happens. Okay. As far as these brow bones go, you know, these go above those orbital. These are not eyebrows. They're eyebrow bones. So what you don't want to do is have a physical, what looks to appear as a coil there. Just like our other muscles, this all gets smushed in to where you don't see it as a line or a coil anymore. It just becomes facial structure. So I'm going to pull that brow, I'm pulling it down my nose. I'm pulling it across my bridge. Pulling it into my eye a little bit. So do you notice that you do not see a coil there anymore? You just see fat around the eye. That's what you're going for. Make sure that you don't have a coil. And when I say make sure you don't have a coil, this is what I'm talking about. I get a lot of this where you can actually still see the coil. Do you see the difference? No. Yes. So just make sure that that's blended in. Now, for the most part, all of the muscles are in. It's at this point that you're going to start looking around your face and you're going to start looking at different angles and making sure that everything reads the same. So I'm going to start putting my face up like this, and I'm going to look from one cheekbone to the other cheekbone. You see how uneven they are? And I'm going to start adjusting and making sure that everything is even. My nose is really uneven. I can come up and look at it from this way and start making my nose the same from one side to another. Maybe I can even see my cheekbones when I'm looking at it this way. But I'm going to go around and I'm going to start making my face even. I am not putting detail in yet. I'm not worried about my detail yet. We're getting there. Right now, it's just about making stuff even. I throw really thin, and this was a thrown form, and it wasn't leather hard because I've waited 3 days. My studio must be really humid. So I'm starting to lose my shape a little bit. I'm doing the best I can here, trying to keep my shape. So you can see how I'm getting a little oblong. This is why you want to make sure that you are leather hard and that you are supporting everywhere that you go. I'm just a little bit, see, that's just not where I want to be as far as leather hardness. So right now I'm going to go ahead and work on just getting my face looking a little better. At this point, if I feel like I need, more information here, I can go ahead and put coils here. Usually I end up putting something more around my eye, so I can do that. Look at your reference images and see what needs to happen. I'm going to show you in a little bit about the eye and kind of getting a more defined lid. So don't worry about that yet. You may end up putting information in there right now, but just work with the muscles you have. If you need to put more information on your nose, go ahead and slip and score some wet clay on it. And then I'll show you how to start cleaning this up and how to define the face a little bit. One thing I want to say about the eyebrows, making sure that the brow coil was smoothed in. Eyebrows are nothing more than hair, right? That's what defines an eyebrow. So again, just to make sure that, we're going to put that definition in there a little bit later. You just want to get that bone structure in right now. So go ahead and mess with it a little bit, and I will come back to you with details and how to clean this up. So I've done some smoothing out, although I'm still far from being done, but you can see that things are looking a little more even. I have quite a bit of mouth work to still do, but I want to start putting lines in so that I know what to do around my mouth. So just wanted to show you kind of where I'm at and talk to you about a few more things before I start really dealing with lines. So first of all, I had you put that kind of orbital eye bone in, but we also, especially as adults, we start to have like some skin that kind of comes down around the eye. The reason I didn't do this all at once is because if you are making a younger eye, or depending on the emotion that you're putting in, it's going to change this skin that happens between our eyelid and the brow of our eye, which, remember, the brow is probably going to be something right here, right? So this is where, again, you really want to look at your reference images and see, the shape of your eye, what that really is going to look like. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start putting some lines on the face here and start to define some things. And that will start to tell me to where I need to continue to add muscle on or face fat on, and where I need to start taking things away. So first off, our lids do go back, right? They kind of go back into usually another flap of skin, which I am going to put some on there, but I just want to show you that, that's kind of your eyelid there. Your bottom of your eyelid always kind of goes behind that top one. So again, all this is going to be defined a little bit better later, but I just want you to start to see kind of how some of these work out. So this line kind of comes down like this, right? That becomes your upper lid, and then that lower lid kind of goes in there. Eventually, when this starts to firm up, I'm going to get my other tools and start defining that a little bit better, but you can kind of see how it's starting to work out there. Again, I'm not really looking at shape of eye right now. I'm just starting to put some lines in. We usually have kind of a line that comes down here like this. Our cheeks usually do something like this, right? And again, whatever your emotion is really going to depend on what's happening there. This line right here usually kind of comes down around the outside of the mouth, and that the mouth, this line, there's usually a little bit of fat between this line and the corner of your mouth, and that is what especially that bottom lip ends up sinking into. You can see that it started a little bit right here. I will either be adding a little bit of fat there, or when I start to define the mouth a little bit, I'll be taking enough away on the mouth that is just going to happen. So just understand that this area right here is what makes the corner of the mouth happen. Okay. On the chin, there's usually a line that kind of comes like this, and then we have our chin. And usually there's this little fat that happens right here, and this little fat kind of goes into these lines over here. Now I'm making these lines a little deep so that you can actually see them. The deeper you put your lines, the older that this is going to look. So just kind of be careful about what you're doing there. The nose, you're probably going to want to have some, the nose is connected there, but you probably want to have some delineation between the nose and the face and kind of round that off a little bit. And then an adult nose especially, there is some kind of line that, or I should say change in volume, that goes from kind of that tip of the nose into this part of the nose. So you can see how once I start going in there and forming, I can see where I'm forming with those lines like that. Okay. So those are lines that I'm going to show you something here in a little bit. I just want you to see what those face lines are and kind of where things fit. Our cheeks also go like this, right back into the ear. Okay, now I do want to talk about this eye real quick here and pushing that eye back a little bit more, because we do have that skin. So I can kind of come in here, and again, it totally depends on what kind of emotion you're having, but usually there is a little more eye skin there. So you can come in here and recess that eye a little bit more, and then once you do that, you can almost make it look more like a flap of skin. Okay. When I start brushing with a wet brush, some of this is going to look a lot better and make a little bit more sense. Okay. So you just need to put whatever you need to put there based on the age of your character, the emotion of your character. And you can see the difference between eyes. This is kind of hollow here. You do need something through here. And the shape of that, the amount of it, is going to depend on a lot of different things. Okay. I probably still need some even through here. Okay. Your lips. Your lips have different volumes in them that I just want to show you right here. I'm probably exaggerating. I'm probably putting too much volume in because I want to make sure that you can see, but I just want you to kind of have an idea of what you're going to be doing here for that top lip. And once I've put those volumes in, I can just start blending them in. And this is, again, going to give my lips volume. I already have those planes, and I don't want to touch the plane of the lip. I'm just putting the volume in the actual lip plane. It's going to start defining my lips a little bit better. Once I start wet brushing this, it'll flow together a little bit better. My bottom lip was pretty thin, so I actually kind of went in here and made it a little bit where I had a little bit more room to work. I'm going to have to mess with that a little bit. But the bottom lip gets these two pads. And the bottom lip actually has like a little seam between those two pads. And those pads are going to give the bottom lip some volume. So you see there's some volume and some definition that's been added to the lips. I did start to not really outline them because, again, it's about planes, but defining the lips a little bit. My clay is just really too wet to be working with, so I keep losing shape of my lips as I put new stuff on. So hopefully as this firms up, I can go back in there and start defining a little bit better. But I want to keep moving forward, so I want to show you something here. Once you start to get those lines in, you can take just a brush with water and start moving the clay around along those lines. Now, again, everything is really wet right now, so I'm able to do this. I will have to go back in here and probably take the carving tool and start redefining some of what's happening here. But I just want to show you that just putting those lines in and then smoothing them out really does start to pull the face together a little bit. Especially my mouth. Again, mouths are so hard. And I just need to do a lot of work with my mouth. But you can start to see how that does start to help. If you need to work more with a sponge, you can also do that, and this will just start smoothing your face together. And those lines just help to define where things are. I haven't quite started working or carving on my nose yet. But you can see how that starts smoothing the face. I'm going to start carving my nose a little bit and defining my nose. I'm going to, right now, just start making my eyes similar. I'm not worried about my pupils yet because you really need to be hard leather hard before you put those in. But I'm just going to clean this up because there's a lot of work that needs done right now. And then I will get back with how to do the eyes and anything else that needs to be addressed. So we're getting there, slowly but surely. So I've done some cleanup and I have did some definition with the nose. As you can see, the nose is looking a little better. I still have some lip work to do, and I definitely have some eye work to do, but everything is just too wet right now, and I'm having trouble doing anything. But what I wanted to show you, I'm going to do some ears here in a minute, but you see how you get all this junk because you've kind of put the face on? I'm going to go ahead and take that serrated rib and just go around the face and clean up that junk. Now I'm going to be putting hair on, so I don't really care about going all the way, but you know that that serrated rib is going to help blend in that stuff. And then of course you can take the metal rib that doesn't have the serrates in it, and you can go ahead and clean that up. And that way you'll have a smooth transition from the face to the hairline. So I just wanted to remind you to do that. I will go ahead and do that on my own on my other side, just so I don't have all of this junk. So you do that once you finish putting everything on the face. Now if you still have carving to do, that's fine, but you definitely want to get that done while you still can. Now, let's talk about ears. I have already sized the ears, so I know that this is about the size that I need for my head. And I'm going to get 2 balls so that I know my ears are going to be the same size. And I'm going to just shape what a general ear looks like. So that means it's going to be kind of this teardroppy shape at the bottom here. Ears have extremely different shapes, and ears are funny because they have so many folds and crevices in the ear. So although I can do a realistic ear, I am not going to. I'm basically going to do like a super general, just get the job done ear, so that it resembles an ear. You know that you're actually looking at an ear. But if you really want to do a good ear, you need to get some photographs, get those reference images, and just look at all the folds in the ear. This is going to be just a very generic ear. Okay. So what I'm trying to do is get my 2 sides to look alike. These don't look alike yet, but I'm going to work on getting them alike. So these are alike enough for me to get started. I could do a better job if I had the time, but we're going to call it a day on that. Now, in order to kind of make them look similar, while they're not attached, I do want to go ahead and just get some general lines in. And when I say general lines, I mean, again, this is going to be really, really general as far as what an ear looks like. So there's going to be, I always call it kind of like a question mark. So I kind of make this line that comes down and then goes up and then down again. So behind this little tab here is going to all be dug out, and the ear hole is going to be here. And once I get it attached, I'll kind of dig into the head a little bit. But I do just like to get this first little line done and carved out, just so that I have them similar on both sides. You can also draw this on a piece of paper and transfer it, right? Because then you'll definitely have them the same. For the purpose of demo, I'm not caring too awfully much. So we're going to call it a day and say, oh yeah, those look great. Now, I don't want to do any more carving until they're leather hard. They are way too wet right now. I just formed them. But what I do want to do is go ahead and get them stuck to my head. So, and the way that I'm going to do that is kind of figure out what angle I want them on. and where I want to put them. These things look awfully weird without ears. Ears make kind of all the difference. So I really do like to put ears. Now most ears aren't straight out like that, right? An ear actually goes against the head a little bit. So I like to get the angle that I'm going to be putting these on and just cut at an angle. And once I get them in place, which I'm going to kind of look at here in a minute, I'm going to go ahead and slip and score my ear on. So I want you to notice that it is at an angle, and I can mess with that angle a little bit more if I need to, but it is at an angle. And when I slip and score, I'm only slipping and scoring what's touching, and I do want to make sure that I allow the bottom part of the ear, right? The ear that's not normally attached, although some people's are. I make sure that I don't attach that part of the ear if I don't want it attached. So that's what you're going to do with the ear. And then once it's leather hard, we'll talk more about making this a better looking ear. Proper placement for an ear is the top of it should be about where your brow is or where your eye is. And the bottom is almost to your mouth, like maybe the bottom of your nose. So just kind of want you to understand that ears are actually pretty low on your head. Okay, if you think about how glasses fit on your face, the middle of the eye is usually where the frame goes to go around your ear, right? So that'd be above the ear. Once you place your ears, you are going to go ahead and smear in this part. So you can smear in that part and then leave that bottom kind of alone. And then the other thing that you can do, you can take a coil of clay and put it back in there just to give the ear a little more stability and to make it look like it's a little bit more like it's a part of the body. So you would smear this coil in toward the body and toward the ear, which because of the way I'm holding it, I don't want to put too much pressure. I should have counter pressure on the other side of my ear. But that is going to make the ear look a little bit better, and then you can push it back into whatever position you want it in. So from this, I can kind of decide how far out I want my ear. And now I'm going to go ahead and let that ear get completely leather hard before I do any more to it. Now that the ears are on, you can go, you know where your hairline is going to be. So what you can start doing now is figuring out where you want your hair. I always think it's nice to have some kind of hair come down on the face. It just makes it look better when you do that. You know, maybe have a little curl come toward the eye, have maybe a little bit of hair come in front of the ear, and then over the ear, right? Because your hairline does that. And then wherever else you want your hairline to go. If you want your hairline to act like it's continuing on, you wouldn't have a bottom hairline, but I do want you to see what a bottom hairline would look like. So I'm going to go ahead and just draw a line on my hairline, and then I'm going to, on the inside of the hairline, like where the hair would be, I'm going to go around and I am going to score along that entire hairline. So I've put the hairline all the way around. I have slipped and scored it, And I have made a bunch of little coils. So I'm going to take my thin coils that I've made here first. I'm going to leave the face alone for right now. I'm going to start kind of in the back because my little tufts of hair in front of my face, I'm probably going to have a thicker coil there. But what I want to do is just go around that hairline and put a small coil. This is going to make it look like that hair is on top of the face, right? And in my other videos and in this class, I've talked a lot about faux it, right? You want to fake it. The last thing that you want to do is take a sheet of clay and put a sheet of clay on top of here. Never, 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 never do that. First of all, this is leather hard and a sheet of clay is going to be wet and it's not going to work, you know, for obvious reasons of clay shrinkage and all of that. But you're also potentially putting a lot of air between those two surfaces, and you know what happens when you put air pockets into clay. Okay. From here, go ahead and let this little tip stay. From here, I am going to go ahead and just pull the coil back into the head. So again, I'm fauxing this. I want it to look like I'm basically just making a hairline. Right now, I'm not thinking too much about the texture of my hair or what my hair is going to look like. It's just a hairline. Now, if you're doing curly hair, obviously you wouldn't have a jagged at the bottom. I mean, you have to use your common sense, right? What does a hairline look like on somebody with curly hair? So I'm just kind of stylizing this hair right now. I'm not really thinking too much about it. I just want to get that hairline in there so you can see what that looks like. Okay. So let's just say you got this hairline in and you just want like a thin hair. You don't really want to go too much further than this. You can just from here take a wire tool and just start texturing the hair. And as you texture the hair, you start digging into your pot, right? So you can just start digging in. And that alone is going to give you hair, right? It's just texture. It gives you hair. You do want to do something at the edges here, however, and by just kind of pulling that hair down. That way it actually doesn't look like you have a coil anymore, right? The worst thing you can do in clay is make something look like it's a slab or a coil, unless there's a reason you want it to look like that. So by pulling that hair off, or pulling that texture through the coil, it is making it look like hair would actually look. So that's one way of doing it, and I could just texture the whole head like this. I don't think that's the nicest hair, and I'm going to show you a thicker, more luxurious hair here in a minute. But what I first want to do is spin around to the face and talk about kind of these tufts right here. When I'm on the face, I like to put a little bit thicker here. And I'll texture it later, but I just want to kind of do something a little bit nicer, maybe pull it off of the face a little bit. Notice again, I'm using coils. I'm not using sheets of clay. See how I've pulled it off a little bit just to give it a little bit of volume, get less two-dimensional, give it some three-dimensionality. So you can see I've just given it a little bit more volume. I also like to do something more interesting with my rim so that it's not just a flat rim. I may go around and either cut in to this or just kind of extend what I have going on here just at the top, just so that it's not this weird flat area. So I'm going to do something with my rim later, but I just wanted to show you how I've kind of gone a little bit further with my hair in the front here. I'm going to hold off on putting the texture in the front because I am going to lay this guy on his face, and I don't want to ruin anything by laying him on his face. And I do want to show you what some fuller looking hair will look like, and I will do that on the back here. So again, instead of just putting big, thick slabs of clay, what I'm going to do is just here and there slip and score coils of clay on. I'll get the thicker coils of clay. Again, if your hair is more wavy, you would want to make your coils look like that. Okay. So I've just put some random coils. They don't look great right now, but what I'm going to do is start blending them in a little bit because this is just giving volume to the hair. I can always add more coils once I get these blended if I want to add more coils. If you're doing something like braids, make a braid, right? What you don't want to do though, like I had a student do cornrows once, which was fine, but what happened was she made every cornrow a big thick piece of hair and then put it on individually. And what that did was it just made it so heavy. So if you're going to do something like that, you still want to kind of dig into your work. So remember that you can add as well as subtract when you're doing this. Now that I've got my volume in, I can leave it like that if that's how I want it, or I can take my wooden handle here that I've used so much on this project, and I can start actually making the texture of hair. There's so many ways you can do hair, right? This is just one little way of doing it. The kind of texture that you want is going to depend on what tools you use. And again, just blending those coils in could have been enough to do what you wanted to do. I'm also moving the clay around. This is when if I wanted to put waves in, I could kind of be going in a different direction to put waves in, or if I was doing curls. Okay, so that just is simple hair, quick simple hair. Now, one thing that I do like to do once I'm done with my hair is I like to take the handle of my tool, because remember I've kind of shaggied it down here, and I may have blended it in with the surface. So I like to take my handle and just run it underneath the hairline. That just picks it up a little bit so it doesn't look like it's smashed in to the body here. So that's just a little trick, just running that under. For my face, if I'm wanting to texture like I did the back, then I would do the same thing here. By just texturing, I want to make sure I don't have that end coil thing going on. So I will want to pull it all the way through that coil. And if it does end up smashing to the face, if there's anywhere that I want to raise it a little bit, I just take that handle and pull it away from the face a little bit. Okay? And that is all there is to hair. So luckily, by the time you get to the hair, It's nice and easy. You can do the hair while your ears are drying and while your eyes are drying, because we've got to wait for those to put the eye details in when this thing is hard, leather hard. So your eyes are going to be the last thing that goes in. Here we are, looking more like a person. We're smoothed out. The nose has been defined. Volume's been added where volume needs to be added. We got some hair in. Now the only thing that's left is the eyes and the pseudo ears, because we're not really doing ears. So something about eyes. We may have a tendency when we go to draw our eyeball in, or to draw our pupil and iris in, we have a tendency to put that whole eyeball or whole colored part of your eye into the lid, right? And so it looks something like that. But that is not that's not how you do an eye, right? Because your lid actually covers a lot of your eye. And depending on where your eye is looking is going to determine how much of the bottom is showing, how much of the top is showing, right? So if you're looking up, you can usually see white on the bottom. If you're looking down, though, you never really see the top part of your eye. That doesn't really happen. And then, of course, where that pupil goes is kind of where the direction of the eye is going. In here, you can see that more of the colored part of the eye is up here. Okay, so just to make sure that you are doing this and not this. That is not good. The first thing I do when I'm going to do eyes is take my needle tool and actually come in here and draw out my eye, knowing that I can always erase if I need to. And I do this so that I can make sure that both of my eyes are the same and that they're both looking in the right direction. My eyes are drawn and they may or may not be cross-eyed. What is the most important thing here is that your pupil, that's the black part, is looking in the same direction, because what I'm going to do is actually leave the pupil intact and use that as a starting point. And I'm going to take my thin wire. Now this is the ones that you may have, and you know the tips are different depending on what number you have. Once you get to making the eye, if you're doing something small, you really need to switch if you have a wire tool that looks like this. Maybe I can get a better, you see how it's just a thin little wire there? Now this tool comes like that. It's just a different number than this, and I don't happen to have that one with me. But I do have this little tiny wire tool here, which I can't do anything without my little tiny wire tool. So I have a set of these that come in all different shapes at the end. But I like to use that tiny loop. It's easier to get into the eye. So what I'm going to do is just come in here and go around that pupil, knowing that if I make any mistakes at this point, I can still add to, if I had to, I could redo the whole eye part. But because my eyes are a little bit kind of popped out a little bit more, I actually have some leeway here. So I kind of do a little bit on each eye and kind of adjust as I go. So what I am doing is I'm leaving the black part of the eye, the pupil, and I'm pulling away the iris. And just as a general rule, blue eyes are you're not going to pull as much away as a dark eye. So a light eye, you're not pulling as much away. A dark eye, you can go deeper. because the shadow is going to catch it a little bit better. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'll show you what that looks like. So here are the beginning of my eyes, and there's just a few things I want to talk about. I start pretty shallow because I'm afraid to go too deep at first because I may need to adjust something. So I will probably go in and dig a little bit deeper, but once I get to this point and I feel like, okay, my eyes are looking in the same direction, they're not cross-eyed, which, by the way, if you're having trouble with that, you're not the only one. It takes a minute to get your eyes not to look cross-eyed. And what I would highly recommend is back away from it and look from a distance. I had a student once that was making a chef, and she was using mixed media with a chef hat, and her eyes were so uneven that she ended up turning it into a gangster, where she ended up, instead of a chef hat, she had a bandana, and she put sunglasses over the eyes because they were so bad, and she didn't recognize it when she was too close to it. So it's important to make sure that you set these down and walk away and make sure that your eyes are pointed in the same direction, unless it's a part of your concept that they're not. So at this point, I do like to take my needle tool, and I just kind of go in and make that final definition. This will be, I will carve this away. I don't want lines all over my eyes, but I do like to go in and make a final definition. And then I will carve a little bit more so it looks natural, because again, we never want to see a line. It's always just change in volumes. But this does kind of help define. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do a little more carving, and then I'm going to show you what the final cleanup of the eye is going to look like. I mentioned before the importance of making sure that your eyes are hard leather hard before you carve them. Mine aren't as hard as I would like them to be. You really do, anytime you carve anything, because you're not modeling anymore, right? You're carving. You really want to make sure you're doing that hard leather hard. I'm going to actually add a little bit of water. So I've got a smaller brush with just some plain water on it. This is going to take away some of my detail. I do like to do this though, just to make sure that I'm not missing something. And I end up putting some of that back in later, but when it's really, really leather hard. So I just kind of want to smooth things over. I want to get my tool marks out of my eyes. Something while I'm doing this to talk about, when you are making your eyeball, there are lots of ways to do this. This is not the only way. But what I would not recommend is that your pupil becomes just a hole. It looks weird when you do that. It's actually pretty spooky when you do that. So what I would never do is just take your tool and just make a hole for the pupil. There are other ways. If you want to indent that pupil a little bit, there are other ways to do it. But don't make a hole. It's super creepy from far away because the light gets lost in it, and it just doesn't look right. Okay, so I may, and before I'm done here, do some final definition of the eye. But what I want to show you right now is that you probably can't see all that well. But right now, my eye is just smushing into, or blending, I should say, into the eyelid. And that's happening at the top and the bottom. I want to make sure that it looks like my eyelid is on top of my eyeball. So I'm going to take my thin wire tool, if you have it. If not, take whatever wire tool you have. And I am just going to go along that eyeball. And I'm doing an undercut there, so that it now looks like my eyelid is on top of my eyeball. Because I've done that, oftentimes I will then have to come in and actually go underneath that eyelid and start pulling the light part of my eye, or the iris part of my eye, kind of keep going with the shape, right? Because you don't want a weird line cutting off the top of your iris. Your iris needs to be indented all the way underneath that lid, and that needs to happen at the top and the bottom. Good enough for who it's for. I'm going to call it a day on my eyes. And I am going to move on to the dreadful ear. To make an ear, leather hard. You want to be leather hard because you're carving at this point. I had you do that initial, I don't know why I call it a question mark because it really is not. That initial arch where you kind of came down and came up. So that initial shape needs to be something like that. And remember that this is a faux ear. This is not a realistic ear. In order to do a realistic ear, you really need to look at an ear and just follow what it looks like. There are a ton of folds in an ear, like a ton of folds. They're super intricate things. And for these, I don't care that your ear looks like a super realistic ear or not. I'm just going to go through some very basic things to just know about an ear, and you can kind of just go as far as you want with it. So we have that basic shape there. Now right here underneath this like little flap, which by the way will end up kind of coming up into the head a little bit, I'm going to go ahead and just put a hole in there because that is where the ear hole is. And I'm actually going to almost dig behind a little bit because that is where your ear canal kind of starts. So I'm undercutting. I'm digging behind and I'm undercutting. And I'm just going to start establishing that area right there. Okay. See, already looking like an ear. Okay. And then, so this is some funny stuff here. Right, the top of your ear does wrap around and it ends up going into that hole somewhere. So I'm just going to kind of just do a little line here, knowing that I'm going to pull that in at some point. It probably is actually going to go a little bit further this way, but I'm just wrapping that around, knowing that there is going to be not a line here, but just a change in volume or a change in direction. The line here is right now is just to establish what I'm trying to do here. So that's going to come in back that way. And then what ends up being kind of cool is we have this fold that happens up here that actually ends up connecting to this piece. And it's almost like just a little outline. So you can come through here and just put a little line all the way up around the ear here, knowing that what's happening here is going to connect to that and pull down through there. So I'm just kind of establishing some lines here. And then we've got this volume that basically takes up this whole area. And it's this volume that ends up connecting into that line I just made. So now that I have these lines drawn, I know it doesn't look like much right now. I want to start pulling away where I know I'm not going to need clay. So I know that there is a crevice between this volume of the ear and the back here. So I'm going to go ahead and pull quite a bit of clay out of there because I want it away from me. I do know that this part and this part are going to connect, but they are going to connect underneath this line. So I'm going to pull this together. because I want to get rid of some of that clay anyway. So you see how I just pulled it together? This is still going to go under that initial ear line. Okay. And remember that there's this little bit here that connects to that, so you can just start pulling some of that stuff together, knowing that you're going to be getting rid of a bunch of this. So right now, let's go ahead and get this top part to come down in, knowing that this big volume, that we're going to leave quite a bit of it, but we know that it falls behind this. So that falls behind that. So this volume now that's coming from behind there can actually be pulled in. Okay. And this is going to eventually kind of go down into here, and I want to get rid of a bunch of this. So a lot of this is part of your ear hole, and a lot of it's got to go. I'm going to change into a bigger tool here. And really, when you're making an ear, I'm not looking at anything, so you should be looking at something when you're doing this. Let me just say that. You'll have a much better time. I know this doesn't really make a lot of sense right now because you're not looking at an ear. Now, if you are looking at an ear, this is probably making a little more sense. Okay. All right, so see how I still have a volume there. That volume is behind the top kind of initial outer fold of your ear. Okay. That volume here kind of makes its way into the top part of that ear and connects here. Eventually you lose it, right? Eventually it just blends in to that earlobe, but it gives you just a little bit of an impression as it moves down. You see how it's going to start to blend? Now that I have that volume in, I can start pulling this volume down, knowing that it actually blends in to kind of the back of the ear. So I can start to just blend that together. Multiple surfaces, right? There's a lot of dimension in the ear. Still want to make sure that that volume stays behind this part all the way into the ear. So you're creating a little bit of depth there. Once you have all of your lines in place, now you can start to come in and dig a little deeper where you need to dig a little deeper. Start defining. Nothing should really be flat, right? This looks a little flat right now, but I can come in here and start rounding things off. This right here actually does start to dig into the ear a little bit. So you can't make sure that that is going down in. Because what happens here, this right here, actually, let's define the bottom here so we know what's attaching and what isn't. But this right here actually attaches to the head. And almost folds into here. It's probably a little drastic. Starting to make sense. So if you can get something even close to looking like an ear, I'm happy. If you really want to do a real ear, you've got to look at an ear, because this is not doing an ear any justice, but it is looking like it's an ear. So as long as it's starting to look like an ear, I'm feeling pretty good about it. I can go in here now and start defining things. I'll probably actually look at an ear and see where I went wrong and make things look a little bit better. Just know that everybody's ears are really different. They all have different kind of folds. I mean, this is pretty, basic, but you'll start noticing ears and how different they actually are. Ear, good enough. So I think I'm finished with this guy. He's relatively cleaned up. Notice that my mouth is still small for the face. I just want you to notice that. My original form kind of came in, and I still needed to pull out more with that mouth. So, I had some pretty big coils there with that mouth, and it still ended up just being a little too short, right? A little too this way. So if that happens to you, you just learn. You learn. And there you go. That is how you make a basic face without any expression. Notice there is no expression on that face. What I have to say about expression is you have to have those reference images. I've said it already. I'm going to say it again. Reference images. What your eyes look like, what your mouth looks like, where your cheek fat is, what's happening in your chin. That is all reference images. I can't sit here and tell you every way that you can make a face. You're going to have to figure that out on your own. But just know that the features are going to be very similar. So I'm going to give an example of that because I want to show you an open mouth and I want to show you teeth. So that's coming next, and I'll explain a little bit more about facial expression and gesture when I show you that. If you're making a planter, now is a good time to put your holes in. I just usually take my fettling knife and rotate it 3 holes is usually good. You can do 1 hole if you feel like it. Whatever you need to do. But this is how you're going to make the holes in your planter. Bam. This guy or gal is the beginning of surprise. So I wanted to just show, I thought that would be a good way to show an open mouth, but just understand, like you can see in this image here, that your mouth can be any shape, and you really want to have that information, again, through your reference images, so that you know what shape to cut your mouth. Surprise is just going to be pretty much an oval, although there are different surprise looks, so just know that. I'm going to just do something simple, though, for the sake of time and the purpose of demo. One thing I want you to notice is that, as you can see in this image, when I went to lay out my face, I wanted to make sure that my mouth had ample area. So my lines aren't laid out like a normal face line. I put the eye line and the bottom of the nose very close together, and I made most of this my mouth. Also notice that the shape of my form is elongated, because if I'm going to do surprise, I want to make sure that I have the room to do that, right? Where my exaggerated feature is going to be, or where I need to maximize my space, I have made sure that my form works with that emotion. So if you're doing a project where you're dealing with emotion or exaggeration, really make sure that you do that. So let's go with a mouth. I know this seems a little scary. I've got my mouth drawn, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm cutting it out. Because what you don't want to do is have a hole and then just start putting the teeth in and the mouth around it. That just looks terrible. Terrible, terrible. So what you're actually going to do is make a pinch pot, so that you are going to recess that in there. And this is going to make a little more sense in a minute. I just wanted to show you you're making a pinch pot. And if your mouth is long this way or something like that, you're just going to manipulate that pinch pot. What you need to know is that you are creating the back of the mouth so that you're not actually seeing inside of the vessel. This also wouldn't be good if you are making a planter or you're making a vase. Obviously, you need to make sure that it is watertight. So this is how we're going to do that. This is a great time to show you the differences in my clay, because I ran out of the initial clay that I was working with. And I didn't realize I didn't have any more of that here in my studio. So you don't want to do this. You do not want to put 2 different clays together ever. I'm going to see what I can get away with here, but this clay has grog in it, this clay doesn't, which means that this clay with the grog in it is going to shrink more, or shrink less, I should say, than the clay without the grog in it, which is not going to shrink as much. So there's a huge chance when I put this in the kiln that is going to crack anywhere that I've added the clay without the grog. Okay, so I've slipped and scored that. This is wet, so I'm not worried about it. And notice that I slipped and scored the wall, not the top, not the back, but the actual thickness of the wall got slipped and scored. You see that there? Now, if I want, I could come out, knowing that I'm going to be putting lips on anyway, I could go ahead and come out here and do what I need to do. My brush is coming apart. Don't leave your brushes in your watery slip. Don't do what I do. They will fall apart a lot faster when you do that. Okay, so I'm pressing this in just as far as it will go. So I'm letting all that hang out, knowing that I'm not leaving that there. So you don't have to worry too much about the shape, as long as it's deep enough on the inside that it goes in as much as you want it to go in. Because anything that is pulling above the surface is just going to get peeled off anyway. But at first I want to make sure that I'm pressing against my wall, because that is what's going to hold this thing on. And then I can just go ahead and pull this apart, or pull this, whatever is pulling up, off. How about that? Now I have a recessed mouth, and that's going to give me depth. It looks so much better doing this than if you were just to put teeth on a flat surface. Oh, that looks so bad. And in my class, if you have an open mouth, you are not allowed to do that. You have to recess the mouth. You have to give it that space. I'm going to set this to the side because before I put my lips on, I do want to get my teeth in there. And I want to show you a few ways of making teeth. You can make individual teeth. It's easy enough to make individual teeth. What I want you to notice, however, is if I am making individual teeth, I am leaving enough surface area at the top so that when I press it up against the gum, I have a nice bit of slipping scoring to do. So if I wanted to go ahead and just put individual teeth in there, I could go ahead and just put individual teeth and slip and score. That is one way of making teeth. The other way of making teeth is to take a coil, flatten the coil in kind of a taper, because again, I want to make sure that I have surface area that is going to stick to the gum, right? Or going to stick to the top of my mouth or the bottom of my mouth. Just to give you an idea, this is going to kind of go against the gum line like that. Now, obviously, unless, you know, the one good thing, like I've said before, about doing these kind of caricatures when you first start is you can do whatever you want. You can make them look as silly as you want. I could have put that in completely round like that, which would have looked silly, but maybe that would have been cool. For these little caricature things, I don't really care if my teeth are even, right? So this is just going to be, right now I'm just fitting so that I know how these are going to look, because I am going to have to let these firm up before I actually put them in the mouth, and I'll kind of explain that. So I can go ahead and say, all right, that's going to be my teeth, and I could set them in there and let them firm up. I don't want to put the lips on though before I get my teeth in. So I'm going to rush dry these, but I just want you to know if you have anything else you can be doing right now, you can go ahead and just let those firm up on their own, because of course it's always better to do that. Here I have my teeth. They're a little less than leather hard right now. And what I'm going to do is put in the teeth and the gum line. What I like to do first is just kind of establish, you know, where my teeth are going to go. So that's probably my center tooth. Or, I mean, not my center tooth. Well, these two are my center teeth. Like my center line of my mouth. And I can just kind of come in here and put some lines in and say those are my teeth. Then I'm going to go ahead and put the gum line in by just making little humps or arches, between my lines. And I will do that to the bottom as well. Maybe I want to have a silly big tooth at the bottom, because, you know, this can be whatever we want it to be. Okay. So there are my teeth and my gum line. Next thing you want to do is take your little tool, your little wire tool. When I said you were going to need this one, I meant it. Now you're going to take your little wire tool and you're going to actually start rounding off the teeth. So my tool is at an angle here. It's not straight down. It's at an angle. And I'm just going to, on each side of every tooth, I go from this way, and then I'll flip it to round the other tooth. Okay? Now you can go all the way through and make the teeth a little bit more separate if you want to do that. Now that I've done that, I probably want to come in here and round that tooth off even a little bit more, because teeth are round. So I'm going to go ahead and do that to every tooth. So we're already looking a little better, but I'm also going to taper the ends of my teeth. And remember, you don't really want to have really thin teeth, right? We like to taper things and make things look thin when they're not really all that thin, because you're going to get into some drying issues that could cause cracking if you did something really thin. And then just the fragility of really thin sheets of clay, you kind of want to avoid that as much as possible. So I'm just making these teeth look like they're thin, like teeth, but in actuality they're actually still pretty thick. So I've got the ends tapered, but really the teeth are still pretty thick. Okay, you really don't want to do this until things are leather hard. Doing this wet is terrible. Okay, so I've got the round teeth. I've got the tips tapered. Now I'm going to go ahead and at the gum line, because your teeth come out of the gum. Here we go with my undercut again. I'm going to take that wire tool. I'm going to push it under the gum and just start taking off the top of my tooth there, so that it looks like it's under the gum. And because I don't want that weird line that I've got going on, I'm going to go ahead and just start blending the top of that tooth in. So this is a really easy way of making some teeth with the gum line. So I'm going to do that to both of my teeth, and then I'm going to clean these up a little bit. Let me just show you real quick too. Once you're good to go here, you can take your wet brush with water, and they really start to come together as a nice looking set of teeth. I'm probably not going to go too much further on the top teeth, just for sake of demo, but look at those teeth. Not bad. Not bad at all. Quick. Before you even put the teeth in, if you wanted to do something silly like putting tonsils in or doing something funny to the back there, I don't know what a tonsil looks like. This is just a placeholder for a tonsil, that does not look good. But, put that stuff in before you put the teeth in. I've made my teeth. Using that wet brush really rounds things off, and I even like to take it through the teeth to the other side because it just rounds things off really nice. I'm going to go ahead and slip and score these in. If everything was super firm, I would go ahead and put a wet coil in between, but this is soaking wet still, so I'm not worried about a coil. But just remember, you're still following all of those guidelines of when to slip and score. Teeth are fun. This looks ridiculous. Right? Isn't that funny? Okay. Now, again, you are following what your reference images are showing you. Usually, you can still do the basic mouth parts like we went through in the step by step. This is how you make a face that doesn't have an exaggeration. So I can still do the parts. Now that is not, I need my lips to kind of come to where the point of my mouth is. So I'm exaggerating. I'm changing things up a little bit. It's going to be weird. And what I want to do is what I did before. So I'm going to go ahead and put my full trim in, or my little Cupid's thing. I'm probably not saying the right word there. And I'm going to go ahead and define my lips, knowing that they're going to be a little more stretched out because I've got this surprise. And again, I'm not looking at anything right now, so I should be shaping this mouth according to what my reference images look like. I'm a little concerned that I'm not looking at something because I do need that information. I'm not good enough yet to be able to do this without that kind of information. And as a result, what's probably going to happen when I go to actually form this, I need to go get my references. Okay, and then just like you did when you made your lip, you're going to get those planes in, and you can put anything you need in. You put your planes in, knowing that you're going to put your volumes in later. Now, the bottom lip, remember before the bottom lip kind of did a crescent moon this way? Obviously, that's not going to work for here. So, again, you're changing things up, but what is going to still be the same is how you're still going to pull some sides down, right? Because your chin's going to go here, and you need that area that goes on the sides of the chin. So you're still doing some of that. So far, he's not super surprised. He's more like, right? That's all right. I'll go with that. I will put all the pads of my lips in later. What I really want to start doing is getting my muscles in so that my mouth starts to make a little more sense. Right now, things are still malleable, so if I need to move my mouth around, I can. I can also do fun things like, why does his mouth have to be even? Right? That's kind of funny. So you can start just messing around with things to make what you want here. Because my mouth is, or my face is more elongated, I'm going to have a really long coil going from all the way up here to all the way down here. I do want you to notice that I did already put my brow line in. When something is surprised, all of that skin that goes around the eye is pulled up. So you're starting to see that that's pulled up. I've also, my eyes are shaped in more of a surprise look. They're open. You know, the good thing to do is get into like cartoons and caricatures of surprise to see what eyes look like. A human's surprise eyes are still going to be oval shaped this way, right? You're never going to have an eye that's this way unless you're doing something more cartoony, which you may do. Your facial muscles are going to change depending on what you're trying to do. That book really talks about when you're making a sad face, what muscles are being engaged with a sad face. When you're laughing, what muscles are being engaged, what's being pulled, what skin is being compressed. So that's such a great reference to have. And then of course those reference images. I know I keep talking about those, but they're going to be what you need. They're going to be what shows you what you need to do. My one video of a surprised face is not going to show you what you need to do for your stuff. When you do have a surprised face, your cheekbone, your cheeks are being drawn down. So when I do the cheeks on him, the cheeks are probably going to be down here, right? Almost pulled. I'm probably not going to have a cheek going up this way because that wouldn't make sense on my face. This line might also be a little more exaggerated than what you normally would do as well. And if you're doing an exaggerated emotion, I mean, go for it. That's part of the project, right? Is exaggerating. Look at how much just that muscle did for that face. One thing I didn't do was put the mouth, when I was doing the mouth, there are those two areas around the mouth that the lips kind of go into. We still want that. And your corner of your mouth will kind of pull in there once you figure out exactly what's going on with your mouth. If that makes sense, you'll have that. You're just going to keep following your references. You know what facial muscles you're going to need. You know the basic steps of doing noses and eyes and mouth, and you just follow what your pictures are telling you to do. The hardest thing about emotion in these things is making your mouth emotion and your eye emotion read as the same emotion and the same intensity of emotion. Very often with these projects, if you put something here, you'll see that the mouth is saying one thing, and if you do this, you'll see that the eyes are saying something completely different. There is a huge disconnect often in these projects with making the whole face look like it has the same emotion. So that is what you're going to want to concentrate on. And so I've started to do that, and I'm working on the whole face at this point while my clay is still somewhat malleable. So you can, open your eyes up a little bit more still. This needs a lot of work up here to kind of figure out what is happening with the eyebrows, what's happening with the forehead, which we haven't really talked much about, but the forehead does all kinds of stuff. So just make sure that you're working on this as a whole and you're adjusting as you go, and make sure that emotion is reading from top to bottom and on the sides. That is the biggest challenge of putting an emotion in a face. I should note that, as with everything in ceramics, this is only one way to make a face. You may find other methods, and people may have come up with things that work better for them. So just know that this is just a start.